morning, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jen and this morning we're doing an allotment tour. Here is the brassica cage, and so in here there are sprouting broccolis, Brussels sprouts and cauliflowers. Now I did not grow these plants from seeds because I've had loads of issues with seeds this year. I bought these as tiny plants from a garden centre and they're doing really well. Over here are my tomatoes. So these smaller ones are grown from seed and they are all like paste tomatoes. So for making sauce, they're all a variety called Napoli VF. And then over here are some of the garden centre plants that I panic bought when I didn't think my seeds were going to do very well. So these two are called Nectar and they are little cherry tomatoes. They are almost ripe and I cannot wait. And then behind them are two Roma tomatoes, but to be honest they've been quite rubbish. I'm not quite sure what's wrong with them. They should be great, but I haven't been very impressed. And then behind them, over here, are some, I call them bush tomatoes, but they're also called determinate tomatoes. So this one is grown from seed, and so is this one, and they are tumbling Tom yellow. And then the slightly smaller ones are again panic bought ones from a garden centre, and I think they are a mixture of colours. I've also interplanted some little marigolds. They're supposedly a companion plant for keeping pests away, but I just quite like them, so I've planted them in there. And there's a little geranium down here for colour, and there's also a stray bush tomato right at the end there, just because that's the space I ended up giving it. Now these are my French beans and my runner beans, and they are going to grow up these strings that I've attached. Now I'm not the best at making bamboo constructions. We've already had a couple of teething issues, but hopefully they'll hold under the weight of the beans. I grew these from seed, to be honest, quite late in the season, kind of the middle of June. The French beans are Cobra and the runner beans are a mixture of a red flowered variety called Firestorm and a white flowered variety called Moonlight. I picked those varieties for the runner beans because they are self-fertile, which means they set fruit, they get pollinated even in rubbish weather, which is pretty much what England does. Now my plot only goes up to the green path that you can see at the end of the black mulch fabric, but what you have here is mostly winter squash, and there are lots of different varieties, mostly because I sowed a bunch of varieties. I had loads of issues with seeds and germinating. I'm not able to grow in a greenhouse or a proper outside space. I'm pretty much growing everything on my coffee table, which means I get pretty rubbish germination, and several of the plants died. So I've had to re-sow spaghetti squash, which are the really small ones here and here. And then all along this row here, these are all Crown Prince squash, which in my opinion is the best winter squash. It is absolutely delicious. I planted them and they all looked like they were going to die. I was so heartbroken. I went home and I was pretty upset because I love these squash plants and I knew I wouldn't be able to find them in a garden centre. But I didn't pull them out, I just kind of left them and hoped. And do you know what? They've done really well. Then the other squash that are really vigorous looking, so these ones, these I bought from a garden centre, and they are a mixture of pumpkins and butternut squash. I mean, for plants that almost look dead, they're looking pretty alright. They're also trying to escape down here. What are you doing? You need to go back over that way. But they're doing really well, and they're just beginning to get female immature flowers as well as male flowers, and I'll show you the difference. Now on here, that little immature flower there, that is a female flower, because it has that tiny little immature fruit just there, that once the flower is pollinated, the flower will drop off and that little immature fruit will start swelling into a delicious Crown Prince squash. But a male flower just has a thin stalk behind it, there's no immature fruit behind this flower, so that's a male flower. And funnily enough, you do need both in order to get fruit. So these are my crown prince squash, and I'm honestly so thrilled that they grew, because they are my absolute favourite. Now behind me is my very ramshackle compost heap, and possibly the least developed, most nasty looking part of the allotment, to be honest. There was lots and lots of rubbish on the allotment, lots of horrible plasticky bits and bags of just random stuff. So this is the bit of the allotment that frankly looks rubbish. But I've built some compost bays. I say built, I tied them together with some string and wire. I've constructed these compost bays using old pallets, and I mean, my compost is weedy and it's probably got bindweed in it, so it's probably completely rubbish, but it's kind of functional, so we'll leave it there. Okay, so we've come down from the winter squash beds here, and here is where I've planted cucumbers. Now, I did sow a bunch of cucumbers from seed. They look very promising. I brought them out to the allotment and they all died. I had about a period of maybe 3 weeks where everything just seemed to die and it was absolutely crushing. But there are some, I think these are called Femspot cucumbers, and this one is a mini cucumber. I also have, just hanging on for dear life just here, this is a gherkin. This is the second time I've tried to sow gherkin seeds. That one, I don't even know whether it's going to make it, to be honest. It keeps being attacked. I've tried my best, but it's not going very well. I had another gherkin sown over here, but it just up and died. The gherkins are not very happy with me this season. Now, moving over here, these are my carrots and parsnips, and I'm a mixture of really pleased with these and actually just really annoyed, because some of the carrots have germinated really, really well. There are little patches where, do you know what, there's loads of carrots, which is fantastic. And then there are lots of gaps in which I've had to sow carrot seeds again, and they are obviously much smaller. The parsnips, now parsnips are quite notoriously difficult to germinate, so I thought I'd get ahead of the game. I germinated some on kitchen paper towel that was damp, and I planted them out so carefully. I watered them religiously, and a bunch of them up and died, and it was so sad. I think I've probably got about 4 that are still from seed. And then I did a really risky thing, and I bought a bunch of tiny seedlings from the garden centre, and I've always read that you should never ever transplant parsnips, because the parsnip is the taproot, and by transplanting it you're disturbing that taproot and you won't get good parsnips. But I mean, they seem very happy plants. That doesn't mean that they've got good taproots, but I guess only harvesting will tell us whether it was a good idea or not, and that is many months off yet. Now over here is 2 rhubarb plants that were on the allotment when I took it over, as well as this weird plastic toy thing that has floated around the allotment genuinely for the last year. But this rhubarb is delicious. I thought it was done for the year, and then we had all that rain earlier in June, and it just sprung back to life. The best rhubarb I ever saw was on this lovely elderly neighbour that I had when I was growing up, and he planted his rhubarb underneath a drain pipe from his house, and it was the biggest and best rhubarb I've ever seen in my life. So if you have a space near a drain pipe, that is where I would plant rhubarb. Over here I've just planted a couple of flowers. So these are sunflowers, and these are little geraniums. There's another spaghetti squash here. I'm just hoping, I really like spaghetti squash, but they've germinated so badly for me this year. And then over here there are 4 little courgette plants, and they are tiny for courgettes right now, but hopefully I'll have some courgettes soon. Now you might be wondering why there's a bunch of cut up pallets in the middle of my allotment, and the reason for that is I'm going to use those cut up bits of pallets to make a path that goes from that side of the allotment right down the middle to this side of the allotment. During the winter I'm going to move this rhubarb over here, and so I'm going to have a central path, and the idea is that these wooden bits of pallet with their kind of pegs that where I've sown them, it's kind of created pegs, and I'm going to push them into the ground, fill it with wood chip, and hopefully create a path. I'm not very good at landscaping things, but we'll see how it goes. And the other kind of feature, if you will, of the allotment is all the wood chip. Now, I've gone for a really heavy mulching system. In some places it is pretty deep, and that's for a couple of reasons really. I don't really enjoy having to weed the entire allotment. I don't mind doing some weeding, but if the ground was uncovered, I would literally be weeding all the time, and I don't think that's super fun, to be honest. And the other reason is that the mulch is really, really good at keeping the soil moist. It's either really, really wet or really, really hot. The weather can't seem to make up its mind, but this mulch does a great job at keeping water in the soil for the plants to use, which is great. And the third reason is that eventually it will break down and start to improve the soil. This soil isn't awful, but it's also not great, and also the soil level when I acquired the plot was quite low. You can see that with the mulch it's about level with the paths again, but there's probably at least 6 or so centimetres of mulch in this spot here. So you can see that the soil level of the actual plot is quite low. The final thing I thought I'd talk about is what is underneath this fabric. It's not exactly plastic like you'd normally think of weed suppressant fabric. It feels much more like a woven fabric. But what is underneath here is horse manure. Now, it's not perfectly rotted, gorgeously dark and crumbly horse manure. There are a couple of local stables that deliver their kind of weekly horse manure to our allotment site, and to be honest, it's pretty rough and ready. It's not, shockingly fresh. The allotment doesn't smell, but it's not perfectly degraded. And this was kind of an experiment, to be honest, to see whether I could cover the really weedy ground, like there are all sorts of nasty weeds on this plot, with horse manure, and then if I could then cover it with this fabric and plant a squash through it, because I knew that squash would love all the nutrients that would eventually leach from this manure into the ground through the rain, because this fabric is permeable. But I also didn't know whether, as the manure broke down, it would be too hot and would scorch the plants, because I feel like I always read about don't use manure as a mulch for your plants because it will scorch them. I didn't know whether it would scorch the roots if I planted into it. So what I did for these plants is, underneath this fabric is horse manure that is not perfectly rotted. It's pretty rough and ready. But when I cut holes in the fabric and I planted through it, I put a little bit of compost into the kind of hole I dug, and then planted my seedlings into it, and it seems to be doing an alright job. I think one of the things that can be off-putting is that you don't have tons and tons of perfectly mature mulch, or you don't have the perfect soil improvers, and that's fine. You just do what you got to do, give it a go. I mean, the worst thing that could happen is everything dies, and so far nothing's died. I say nothing's died. Plenty of things have died, but not everything has died. I've got lots of hopes and dreams for this allotment. I'd love to see some more fruit. I think next to the rhubarb patch, which you can see here, I would love to grow some blackcurrants. I think I might try buying a plant from a garden centre and then taking lots of cuttings. If you're interested in how to do that, let me know and I'll make a video. So I'd love to see some more soft fruit. That would be amazing. I'd love to grow raspberries. We used to have raspberries growing up and they were amazing. So I'd love to do that. I want to build that path. I'd love to build a little shed, but construction is just not my forte. I mean, if I can't build a brassica cage out of sticks, can I build a shed? I don't think so. So I'd love a shed. I'd love some kind of little propagation space, because growing on my coffee table is not going well, but we shall see. There's time. There's always next season. There's still so much to learn here. There's so much to try, and I'm also working on a project where I try and grow all of my own vegetables for Christmas dinner. So if you're interested in how I'm doing that, let me know and I will film a little video about it. So that's my allotment. I hope you enjoyed having a little snoop around. It's one of my favourite things to do, to watch videos of other people's allotments and try and pick up some tips and tricks. And hopefully we'll do another one soon. So thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe if you'd like to. And I'll see you next time. Bye!